In a sport full of chaos, controversy, and criminal records longer than a CVS receipt, one name still stands out as the most terrifying talent to ever strap on a helmet. Lawrence Phillips wasn't just your standard bad boy athlete. This man was a walking red flag factory, a running back so violent that his own coaches feared him, his teammates begged for him to be benched, and the criminal justice system basically put him on layaway. This is the story of a guy who dragged a woman down a flight of stairs by her hair, and still started in a national championship game 2 weeks later. A guy who missed a blitz pickup that ended a Hall of Fame quarterback's career, and somehow, that was only like the 8th most insane thing he ever did. Lawrence Phillips had the kind of athletic talent that gets scouts drooling and GMs fired for ignoring character concerns. But this wasn't just a player with off-the-field issues. This was a dude who treated life like a GTA sandbox mission, and for years, the football world looked the other way. He was explosive on the field, and explosive off of it. He bulldozed linebackers and his own life with the same reckless intensity, and the craziest part? Nobody seemed to know how to stop it until it was far too late. You've heard of the NFL's all-time greats. You've heard of the league's biggest busts, but buried somewhere in between is this absolute anomaly. A man who could have been an all-timer, but instead became a cautionary tale so dark that even ESPN doesn't like to talk about it. This is the rise, fall, and horrifying spiral of Lawrence Phillips, the most psychotic NFL player ever. Before Lawrence Phillips became a one-man demolition crew of his own career, he was just another kid lost in the system. Born in Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1975, Phillips was thrust into instability from the start. His mother moved him to California while he was still young, and by age 11, he was living in foster care. You could practically see the storm clouds forming. He bounced around group homes in South Central Los Angeles, places better known for gang initiations than football dreams. And yet, on the field, Phillips wasn't just surviving, he was dominating. Football became the only structure in a life that had none, and as cliche as that sounds, for Lawrence, it was disturbingly true. He had this raw, violent power that coaches couldn't stop raving about. By the time he reached Baldwin Park High School, he wasn't just the best player on the team, he was a walking highlight reel with a mean streak that could split a face mask in half. He ran angry, not in the metaphorical angry runner sense, like legitimately pissed off. Every carry looked like it was personal. Scouts took one look at the tape and didn't ask questions. Big, fast, relentless, that's an automatic full ride. Character concerns be damned. And then entered Tom Osborne's Nebraska Cornhuskers. Osborne was a legend, stoic, principled, respected, but he also had a blind spot the size of Memorial Stadium when it came to players who could win him football games. And Phillips? Phillips could win football games. Big ones. He committed to Nebraska in 1993, a time when the Huskers were already a national powerhouse, but they hadn't won the big one in over 2 decades. In Lincoln, Phillips was untouchable, on the field and off it. He broke tackles like they owed him money, powering through defenders like they were minor inconveniences. The coaches knew what they had, a generational back who could carry an entire program, but behind closed doors, the same issues that followed him from childhood were quietly getting worse. There were whispers, outbursts at practice, anger issues, confrontations with teammates. Coaches wrote it off as intensity. He just wants to win, they'd say. But what they were really seeing was the beginning of a time bomb, one that was already ticking. By 1994, he helped carry Nebraska to a national title. By 1995, he was a Heisman favorite. But then came the incident that would define his entire life. One night in September, Phillips broke into the apartment of his ex-girlfriend, Nebraska basketball player Kate McEwen, while she was with another football teammate. He dragged her down a flight of stairs by her hair, beat her, left her bruised and bleeding. You'd think that'd be it. Jail, dismissal, career over. But this is college football, where moral clarity comes second to the win-loss column. Osborne suspended Phillips for 6 games, then reinstated him just in time for the national title run. When reporters asked why, Osborne said Phillips had been through enough and deserved another chance. Phillips returned and balled out, like nothing happened, ran over defenders like he was making a point. The Huskers destroyed Florida in the Fiesta Bowl, national champs, legacy secured, and yet the unspoken truth lingered in the air. Everyone knew who he was, what he did, and no one, not one single person in power, stopped him. This wasn't just a red flag, this was a flare shot into the night sky. What happened next would make even that look tame. By the time the 1996 NFL Draft rolled around, Lawrence Phillips had a rap sheet longer than most rookies' resumes. But he also had something else: elite talent. The kind of talent that makes general managers start squinting through rose-colored glasses. Scouts were conflicted. On one hand, he had all the tools: power, speed, vision, balance. On the other, he had just assaulted a woman and barely avoided prison because a legendary college coach vouched for him. You'd think that would knock a guy out of the first round entirely. You'd be wrong. The St. Louis Rams had the 6th overall pick and a need at running back. Their head coach, Rich Brooks, and team president, Steve Ortmayer, believed in second chances, or at least in the kind of PR spin that makes them sound noble. Against the advice of basically everyone with a working moral compass, they drafted Lawrence Phillips, and just like that, one of the most unstable athletes in football history was handed millions of dollars and the keys to an NFL franchise. It took him about 2 weeks to implode. Phillips skipped team meetings, showed up late to practices, partied like he had already made the Hall of Fame. He was fined repeatedly for missing curfews and walkthroughs. Then came the off-field drama, more assault allegations, multiple arrests, weapons charges. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, with the driver flipping you off the whole way down. Just to give you an idea of how out of control he was, these are some real stories from his time in the league with the Rams. There are multiple reports, including from former players, that Phillips would show up visibly hungover to practice, sometimes barely able to stand during drills. This wasn't a one-time thing, it was a pattern. Coaches would rehydrate him, let him sit out reps, and still start him on Sundays. He'd blindside defenders during non-contact drills. He once reportedly threw a punch at a linebacker during a walkthrough because he didn't like how hard he was hit the day before. It got so bad that some Rams players started asking coaches to keep him out of drills for their own safety. This one's unconfirmed but widely whispered among players from that era. The story goes that Phillips got into it with a teammate during a locker room argument and pulled a knife. Whether it was a pocket knife or something bigger depends on who's telling the story. The Rams buried the incident, and nothing ever came of it officially, but multiple former players have hinted at it being true in interviews and documentaries. Multiple reports say Phillips was openly defiant with coaches, including screaming matches and flat-out refusing to run certain plays. Once, during a film session, he was criticized for missing a block and responded by threatening the coach in front of the whole team. One Rams staffer later said, "We were afraid of him, not just afraid he'd ruin a game, afraid of what he might do to someone." The Rams actually assigned a staffer to keep tabs on Phillips, a full-time handler, to make sure he showed up to meetings, didn't go off the rails, and stayed sober. The guy quit, not fired, quit. He said Phillips was unmanageable, and trying to control him was like babysitting a live grenade. On the field, he was inconsistent. He'd rip off a 30-yard run and then miss a blitz pickup so bad you'd think he forgot what sport he was playing. Coaches said he mentally checked out. Teammates said he didn't seem to care. And remember, this was before social media, before every misstep became a trending topic. Phillips was tanking his career the old-fashioned way. By the end of his rookie season, he'd averaged just 3.4 yards per carry and fumbled 5 times. He was benched, then reinstated, then benched again. The Rams had seen enough. After just 25 games, they cut him. This was not an easy decision. Their head coach even talked later about how he had cried when he had to make the choice because he really did want to help get Phillips on the right track. But there was just nothing they could do to get through to him. No matter what they tried, he was insistent on destroying his own life. The only thing left for them to do was let him go. But even then, the NFL wasn't done with him. He was like a broken slot machine teams kept pulling, hoping it would pay out just once. The Dolphins picked him up next. Jimmy Johnson, a coach who had worked with his share of egomaniacs, figured he could fix him. That lasted 2 games. Phillips was cut for missing practices and, according to Johnson, not being reliable. Translation: "We're scared of this dude." Then came San Francisco. Now, here's where it gets haunting. In 1999, the 49ers signed him as a backup, hoping to reignite some of that college magic. For a brief moment, it looked like it might work. He ran hard, he stayed quiet, he did his job. Then came October 18th, 1999, a Monday Night Football game against the Arizona Cardinals. Steve Young, the Hall of Fame quarterback and one of the NFL's most respected leaders, dropped back to pass. Phillips, assigned to pick up a blitzing corner, completely blew the assignment, didn't even pretend to block. The hit was brutal, helmet to helmet. Young's head snapped back like a crash test dummy. He hit the turf and didn't move. That hit ended Steve Young's career. Let that sink in. Lawrence Phillips was so negligent on the field that he got a Hall of Famer retired. The 49ers cut him the next day. By then, his NFL career was officially in shambles. 3 teams, 0 growth, one legacy-smearing incident after another. And still, he couldn't stop spiraling. His problems weren't just career-related, they were deeply personal, deeply psychological, and they were about to get way worse. The NFL had finally washed its hands of him, but for Lawrence Phillips, the most disturbing chapters of his story were still to come. By the time the NFL slammed its door on Lawrence Phillips, most players would have taken that as a wake-up call. Time to get help, reflect, rebuild. Lawrence didn't just ignore the wake-up call. He burned the entire phone booth down, with the league done giving him 2nd, 3rd, and 4th chances. Phillips bounced to NFL Europe and the Canadian Football League, and weirdly, he actually played well. In 2002, he helped the Montreal Alouettes win a Grey Cup. On the field, he looked like the Guy Scouts once called a can't-miss Hall of Famer. But off the field, the chaos never stopped. In CFL locker rooms, teammates described him as paranoid, short-tempered, volatile. One former Alouette said he was legit afraid to be around him. He kept to himself, didn't trust anyone, and the few people who tried to connect with him got shut down or shoved away, sometimes literally. Eventually, the behavioral red flags piled up again, and even the Canadian Football League, arguably the most forgiving league on earth, cut ties. That's when things went from bad football decisions to full-blown criminal activity. In 2005, Phillips was arrested for assaulting yet another girlfriend, allegedly choking her until she passed out. But that wasn't even the headline. The real insanity came just weeks later, when Phillips was playing a pickup football game in Los Angeles. He got into a trash-talking match with some teenagers. So what did he do? He got into his car, waited for them to walk away, and then deliberately drove into 3 of them. Let's just pause here. A former NFL player, who had already been arrested for assault, got behind the wheel and used his car as a weapon over a pickup football game. He was charged with 7 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, plus hit and run. But while out on bail, he was arrested again for domestic violence. At this point, his rap sheet was starting to look like a Madden playbook, except every play was just another felony. In 2006, the hammer dropped. Phillips was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the car incident. That should have been it. A decade behind bars to cool off, reflect, maybe even rehabilitate. But nope. While in prison, he faced more charges, allegedly choking another girlfriend back in 2005. The trial caught up with him, and in 2008, he was hit with another 25-year sentence. Total time, 31 years. He was done. His story should have ended right there, locked away, forgotten. But Lawrence Phillips wasn't finished making headlines, not even close, because inside those prison walls, his paranoia grew darker. He became more erratic, more isolated, and in 2015, the final act of this nightmare began, with blood on the floor of his cell. And what happened next? That's the part where things get really disturbing. By 2008, Lawrence Phillips wasn't a football player anymore. He was inmate number G31982, locked away in California's Kern Valley State Prison. No more second chances, no more enabling coaches, no more excuses. The man who once bulldozed linebackers was now pacing around a concrete cell, serving a 31-year sentence for a blend of felonies that would have made Tony Montana raise an eyebrow: multiple assaults, weapons charges, hit and runs, and domestic violence. If you wanted to trace the downfall of raw talent, you could hang his mugshot in the dictionary next to the word wasted. But inside prison, the demons didn't die. They just got louder. Guards and inmates later described Phillips as paranoid, quick to anger, and isolated. He didn't join cliques. He didn't talk to many people. He seemed constantly on edge, like he was preparing for a fight that never came. Or worse, a fight he thought only he could see coming. In April 2015, Phillips was assigned a new cellmate, a 37-year-old man named Damian Soward. Soward had been convicted of first-degree murder. So it's not like this was a gentle roommate situation. These were 2 violent men, locked together in a 6x8 box, every day, all day. And just 11 days after being paired up, Soward was found dead, strangled to death with a bedsheet. Who was the prime suspect? Take one wild guess. According to prison officials, Phillips had murdered his cellmate in cold blood. No camera footage, no confession, just a dead body in a locked cell and one man standing. The murder charge was official, and suddenly, Phillips wasn't just a disgraced football player or an inmate with a long rap sheet. He was now an accused killer. His behavior reportedly became even more erratic after that. He claimed people were trying to poison him. He stopped talking to his legal team. He told his mother, in letters, that prison guards were conspiring to destroy him. Paranoia, delusion, isolation, whatever was left of his mental stability was gone. Then, on January 13, 2016, Lawrence Phillips was found dead in his cell. The official report, taken out by hanging. He had tied a bedsheet to a ventilation fixture and taken his own life, just months before he was set to stand trial for murder. But almost immediately, questions started pouring in. Was it really self-inflicted, or was there something else at play? Some prison staff and advocates pointed out irregularities. How could a man on self-preservation watch have access to a sheet and privacy long enough to hang himself? Why weren't guards checking in more frequently? Others dismissed the theories. They said Phillips had been mentally deteriorating for years and that, in the end, the weight of his past finally crushed him. One former teammate said it bluntly, "If you've ever talked to him, you knew he was going to die like this." Either way, the story was over, or at least the man at the center of it was. No triumphant redemption arc, no final interview, no made-for-TV apology tour, just a cold prison cell, a trail of violence stretching back to childhood, and a potential NFL Hall of Fame career rotting in the footnotes of football history. There are players who squander their potential. There are players who make mistakes. And then there's Lawrence Phillips, a man whose downfall wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a failure of everyone around him who looked the other way. From the foster system to college football, from the NFL to solitary confinement, every institution that touched him failed to either help him or stop him. He didn't just fall from grace. He jumped, lit the bridge on fire behind him, and dared the world to follow. When the dust finally settled on Lawrence Phillips' story, there wasn't a legacy of yards or touchdowns or broken records. There was a legacy of fear. Coaches feared him, teammates feared him, even his own fans feared what he might do next. And not in the awe-inspiring Ray Lewis, "This guy might knock someone's helmet off" kind of way. No, this was a real, visceral, don't turn your back on him kind of fear. Multiple NFL teammates later admitted they didn't want him in the locker room. One told reporters, "He made everyone uncomfortable. You never knew what would set him off, and that was when he was just playing football. Once he left the field, the trail of destruction only got darker." Tom Osborne, the legendary Nebraska coach who reinstated him after the infamous assault, later said he was just trying to help a young man turn his life around. Noble sentiment, devastating result. But that's the paradox of Lawrence Phillips. He was always someone else's responsibility, until he wasn't. The foster system didn't fix him. College football enabled him. The NFL tried to profit off him. And when it all collapsed, everyone just sort of shrugged and walked away. Nobody wanted to be the villain who gave up on him, but no one wanted to be the hero who actually stopped him either. And let's be clear, this isn't just a story about one man's fall. It's a cautionary tale about the institutions that protect talent above all else. The kind of story that forces you to ask uncomfortable questions. How many red flags does it take before someone finally gets benched? How many women have to get hurt before winning stops being the only thing that matters? Because Lawrence Phillips could have been a legend. He had the talent, the body, the instincts. Some coaches said he was the best running back prospect they'd ever seen. Not one of, the best. But none of that mattered, because inside all that potential was something broken, something dangerous, and no one ever figured out how to fix it. Instead, they just hoped it would stay quiet long enough to win games. Spoiler, it didn't. In the history of the NFL, there have been busts, there have been villains, there have been tragic figures, cautionary tales, and what-if stories that end in ruin. But Lawrence Phillips doesn't fit neatly into any of those boxes. He wasn't just a wasted talent. He wasn't just a bad guy. He was something else, something far more unsettling. He was a human disaster, violent, volatile, and gifted beyond measure. A man who could have been remembered for jukes and touchdowns is instead remembered for police reports and court dates. His name doesn't come up in highlight reels. It comes up in true crime documentaries and whatever happened to threads on Reddit. He had the kind of natural ability that front offices drool over, but he also had an inner darkness that no one knew how to manage, or maybe didn't want to manage, because managing it might have meant giving up wins. And for a long time, wins mattered more than women, more than ethics, more than sanity. So coaches crossed their fingers. GMs spun narratives, reporters asked softball questions, and Lawrence kept running, through defenders, through teams, through warning signs, through lives, until finally, there was no one left to hand him a football. And when it was over, it wasn't just his career that was gone. It was the man himself, dead in a prison cell at 40 years old, once cheered by tens of thousands, now buried beneath a legacy no one wants to talk about. We've seen troubled players, we've seen violence, but we've never seen a story quite like Lawrence Phillips. Not just the most psychotic NFL player ever, maybe the most tragic. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you taking a second to subscribe and press the like button so we can hit 1,000 subscribers. If you really enjoyed it, then be sure to check out our last video about the secret NFL drug empire nobody seems to talk about, which was ran by the infamous Sam Hurd.